For some reason, there's a scene in Bogus that I remember distinctly from my childhood. And I won't say what the scene is because it's quite a prominent part in the narrative, but I will just say it involves the exterior of the building. But despite the fact that I could remember this one scene, having not seen the film for over 20 years, I decided to watch it again because I couldn't really remember much else about the film, which is quite odd. It was released in 1996. I would have been 4 at the time. I probably saw it around the age of 6 or 7, which I think is a pretty decent age to see this film. It is a PG. And it was directed by Norman Jewison, with a story by Jeff Rothberg and Francis X. McCarthy Jr. And I think the reason I probably watched this is because Whoopi Goldberg was in it. My mother was a big fan of Whoopi Goldberg. By default, so was I. And watching this as an adult now, I thoroughly enjoyed her performance. So I knew that even if the film didn't live up to whatever I enjoyed as a child, I'd still love it for her. And also Haley Joel Osment, who was a fantastic child actor. I always loved watching anything he did from a young age. And the description from IMDb for this film is as follows. Recently orphaned, a young boy is taken in by his godmother, who is shocked to realise that she can see the boy's imaginary friend, a flamboyant French magician named Bogus. That sounds like a depressing story. This little boy has been orphaned and he's taken in by his aunt Harriet, and she can see this Bogus, and of course she thinks she's losing her mind to begin with. And it's all about the importance of Bogus, first of all, as Albert's friend. Albert is played by Haley Joel Osment, and Bogus is Gérard Depardieu. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologise if you heard my phone vibrate there. And it is very fun, very interesting when Harriet realises that she can see Bogus, and obviously a lot of hilarity ensues thereafter. Bogus actually plays a really important part in Albert's development, because obviously he's been orphaned, he has lost an important person in his life. It's kind of like Bogus is replacing this character, but unfortunately everything is not a bed of roses, because Bogus does get him into some difficult situations, and it makes some of Albert's behaviour questionable. So it's all about his journey to coming to terms with being orphaned, to learning about Bogus, and leaving behind this potential problem to kind of overcome the loss of his childhood innocence. I don't think I have explained that very well at all, but I like the moral, I like the message, and I love Harriet as a character. I absolutely think she's fantastic, brilliantly played by Whoopi Goldberg. Albert is fantastically played by Haley Joel Osment. At the time when I was a child, I would have known who Whoopi Goldberg was because my mother watched Sister Act almost every day. Haley Joel Osment, I probably wouldn't have seen anything else he'd done at the time. But he is fantastic, and now looking back in hindsight, I can see why there are various aspects of this film I would have loved. The narrative is not my favourite. If this were not with Whoopi Goldberg and Haley Joel Osment, but it starred 2 actors I'd not heard of, didn't really have any emotional connection with, then it probably wouldn't have been as enjoyable. I think the casting is what makes this perfect, but there's obviously a very emotional message against the backdrop of a comedic family film. It's got everything in it. It really ticks all of the boxes. I think it'll appeal to some people more than others, but I think it's one I'm pretty happy to recommend Bogus.